if you have noticed, right, when it comes to manifesting small quantities of money, random check in the mail, this sort of thing, okay, this is within the purview and the experience of many, many people. But when it comes to larger quantities, 6 figures, beyond 7 figures, etc., this is really operating under different rules. Okay, and I've said before that I ran a poll. It was now probably a couple of years ago, actually, to understand what happened to people's income after they experienced a spiritual awakening. And I think it was something like 67% of people said that their income had gone down, which is totally unacceptable to me, right? So today's class, right, which I've titled The Economics of Destiny and Egregores, okay, but I could have titled it many, many things. Today we're going to be doing an advanced training on what really is moving large quantities of money in this economy from an economic perspective, but also the energetics of the economics, okay? So I have some notes, but we're going to be very chill and we're just going to be hanging out, okay? So let's see. Right. So one of the things that I wanted to touch on, right, is that in our beautiful little spiritual community, we have this very common idea that money is energy. Yeah. And while it is energy, I often feel like this is an incomplete thought, okay? Because what type of energy are we talking about, right? Okay, so this is what I want to unpack a little bit today. So this is what we're going to cover. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my money story, okay? And I'm going to share 3 myths that we have all been programmed to believe about money, okay? Some will be familiar and some will not be familiar to you, okay? And then I'm going to unpack the hidden forces behind specifically large quantities of money moving around our economies, okay? And how to work with this, right? And we'll do some questions as normal at the end, okay? So, money story, right? Some of you would have heard this before, but for those of you who have not heard it, right? My particular upbringing was unique in the sense that my mother was obsessed with money, right? And not just money in general and getting a lot of money, okay? She grew up quite poor, you know, she was born in the UK, but grew up, spent a lot of her childhood and adolescence, right, in Africa. And when she came back to this country, to the UK, right, she was pregnant with me, okay, and didn't have anything, like had nothing, okay. She was very ambitious and wanted to make something of herself. Now, because of really a number of mental health challenges that she had, she became very religious and very, very obsessed with manifesting winning the lottery, okay. My entire childhood was very much overshadowed by this idea, right? And not even just childhood, like into my adulthood, okay? This hasn't really changed. So if you have ever wondered what would happen if you had the confidence to just focus on manifesting 24/7, okay, and not doing any action, I can tell you from personal experience that it does not end well, okay? It doesn't end well, right? So particularly when it comes to things like the lottery, okay, which I might, you know, if you've got questions on that, I can answer, but I might do another class on why this is not a good thing to try and get, right? Okay, so this was my childhood, right? And so that experience completely tainted our relationship. We now don't have one, okay? She really chose that path and being obsessive about that over our relationship. That's so interesting, Sasha, that you're saying your dad was like this. Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, I think it's probably quite common, actually, more common than we would realize. So I then, I guess, inherited some of that curiosity because I wanted to understand, well, what is this thing that she is so concerned about that is more important than me, right? So I did all of the normal things. I went to school, I got good grades, I went to a really good university, I got a really good job, okay? And you've had some of this story, right? Progress through the ranks reasonably quickly and really made life-changing income, right? And then I've opened businesses and all of the things, right? Now, this is the thing that I learned through that, okay, is that it's not all action and it's not just strategy. There is a spiritual dimension to all of this. And I talked about a little bit about that last week as well, okay? So that just gives you a little bit of context of like why I'm interested in this topic in general and the different perspectives from which I come at it. So I have this story, right? This childhood story. I have my own experience of becoming an accountant, right? Going to school, going into a financially based career, right? And making my own money, right? In career and in business, okay? And then I'm a spiritualist. So this is why, right? So let me share with you some of the things that I have come to learn that are myths, okay? So the first one you will be really, really familiar with, which is myth number 1, right? Money comes from hard work, okay? Now we all know, this is the thing that I find really interesting about this. We all know that it's a myth now, right? We are all exposed to the idea of energetics, but also leverage. Just even before you get into the spiritual dimension, the idea of leverage, delegation, working with teams, systems, and all of these things help us to understand that it's not just how hard you work, it's an element of how smart you work, okay? If we want to increase our income, right? However, even though we know this, we still find ourselves, particularly if like money is tight or we're not seeing as many clients as we want to, we still find ourselves asking the question, what more can I do? What more can I do? And we judge ourselves, right, for not working hard enough. We think, oh, I'm not doing something. I'm not doing enough of something. Okay. So even though the consciousness has come to a place where the narrative has changed, right, around we know that it's not just hard work that produces income, okay, our subconscious is still very much in that pattern, and whenever things get challenging we revert back to that program, okay, because it's so deeply embedded. Okay, so we know that hard work doesn't create more money, okay, right? Hard work is really, really much more linked to the survival instinct, right, in enabling us to survive, okay? So the second myth, which maybe many of you have not given us as much thought to, is that providing more value leads to more money. Now, this is the upgraded myth, okay, because they can't get us any longer on the you just need to work harder, okay? What many of us are now doing is that, how can I provide more value? How can I provide more value? How can I provide more value? And I mean value in the broadest sense, okay? Now, this is the thing about that. Value is not objective. It's not objective. There isn't a collectively agreed upon definition of value, right? There are some things that other people consider to be valuable that we don't consider to be. And it doesn't stop those people making money, okay? There is an element of consensus. Now, this is the thing about value. When we focus very much on providing value, which I'm not saying we shouldn't, by the way, we absolutely should, because providing value is an outworking, an expression of our destiny, right? It's an expression of why we're here. So we should always be focused on providing value, but not in order for us to make money. Hopefully you guys see the difference, right? Working to provide value because it is a natural expression of who you are and what you want to do on this planet is a very different thing than feeling that you need to earn money, right? Or to earn worthiness or deservedness, okay? So the value thing is interesting. And if you think about logically, okay, let me give you some examples of, you know, does a banker provide more value than a nurse? You know, I think most of us would contend that they don't, okay? But one of them earns significantly more money. So value is not objective. Value is about something else. Another really good example of these, right? These have been my pet peeves for many, many years. So if you look at what's happened in Silicon Valley and in startup culture, okay, literally billions of dollars have changed hands by exchanging and selling and buying companies that have never ever turned a profit. Even WhatsApp, which I love and I use, right, bought by Facebook, never made any money, never made any money. And yet the founders are inordinately wealthy, okay? So if we use the very narrow sense of value in that sense in terms of being profitable, even that within the business world is not necessarily enough or the determinant factor of money being exchanged. Hopefully you're following me, okay? Similarly with Uber, WeWork, if you're familiar with the WeWork story, you know, WeWork, I think most of us will be familiar with co-working spaces, essentially just real estate, absurd valuation, okay, accepting money from a Chinese bank. And they were just real estate, okay? Their valuation was determined by perception. And so this is the thing that I want us to really dismantle, this myth of trying to earn money in exchange for value, trying to provide as much value as possible so that we can earn money. In fact, the idea of earning meritocracy is something that we need to let go entirely, right? This idea of deservedness. So firstly, we all thought we needed to work hard to deserve something through working hard. Now we've kind of transcended that belief and now we're trying to earn our place and deserve what we want through providing more value, right? So I want to disabuse you of that too. Okay, so number 3, right, if you have managed to survive the first 2 myths, this is one that you probably think of a lot, which is that more income comes from ownership, right? Ownership of assets, equity, intellectual property, land, right? And so this, I mean, all of these have an element of truth to them, right? But what we're trying to get to here is like the deeper truths, yeah? So ownership introduces leverage. Ownership allows you to have royalties and payments and dividends, right, associated with the assets that you own, okay? But ownership alone isn't magic, because if you own something that people do not perceive to have any value in, it doesn't matter whether you own it. So let's go back to 2008 in the credit crunch, okay? A lot of people owned homes, houses, okay? And overnight those things were collapsing in value. It didn't matter whether they owned something if the market didn't feel like it had any worth and value, okay? So these are three ways we think about how we can deserve what we want when it comes to income, right? When it comes to money, right? So let's see. So the thing about ownership, right? It's like everything else. It sits within a belief structure. Someone has got to believe that something has got value, okay? So this, in summary, is really what money is about. Money is about power and the manipulation of perception and the creation of narratives, okay? So in the first class that I did on money egregores, I explained that I talked about the history of the development of money. I talked about the fact that in this current environment, our money is not based on anything, so it's not linked to gold or to the value of any real assets. It's just printed by the central banks, okay? And so its value is determined by our collective belief in it, okay? This is not even a spiritual thing, this is really just economics, okay? And so you can see that the idea of belief and perception really underpins our entire monetary system in the West. Yeah. So in order to start to tap into some of that energy, you need to understand belief, perception, narrative creation, storytelling, okay? And how to monetize those narratives, okay? This is the work of money egregores. So money egregores, as I explained in the previous class, are collective thought forms that have been created specifically, okay, to fulfill a certain purpose, right? This is what egregores are in general, but money egregores in particular have been created to consolidate power from everybody into small groups, right? Elite groups, individuals who have more power over other people. If you still think that money is about money, you've missed it, because it really isn't. These people are accumulating more and more, right? it's not anything they're ever going to spend. They're accumulating it so that they can influence and shape reality in the direction that they want it to go. Okay, now that is from an esoteric perspective, but also really practically when it comes to politics, when it comes to laws, setting laws, right, getting away with law breaking, all of these things. It's to do with creating reality. Okay, so this is why I say that wealth creation is really about reality creation. It's really about reality creation. Yeah, and so once we get into that mindset, it stops being about money, and money starts to chase where it sees power, because this is what it's been programmed to do. Okay, so what else do I want to share about this? I've explained what egregores are, right? And you can go back to the previous class to understand a little bit more about what it is, okay, and how they work. And I'll take some questions as well, okay? So this is the thing that I want you guys to take away from this, okay? You need to be able to tap into your own personal power, right, in order to work with the egregores, okay, because they have been programmed specifically to be attracted to power, to chase power, and what they are fed is the conscious, unconscious, the word I'm looking for is people's unconsciousness, okay, so people not being aware that these things exist. But power works in this way. This is what it feeds on, ignorance, right? It feeds on ignorance and it feeds on powerlessness. So if you want to work with it, you need to be able to tap into your own power. The number one way to do this is by understanding what you came here to do, exercising your free will to follow your own destiny, which is why I talk about destiny so much. You need to be able to be tapped into your own personal power, right? So in that first class, I talked a lot about the power dynamics in particular, okay? In this class, I'm introducing the idea that this is about the manipulation of perception, right? Value is not an objective thing. It is a narrative. It's the result of a narrative that has been created. So every time that you create a narrative, you are creating reality. When you're seeing that these people are creating companies and they're able to monetize them, they're not actually creating companies, they're not creating products, and they're not creating services. What they are doing is creating realities that you and I are opting into, okay? This is the level that you want to be thinking at. The other thing that I want to share with you is that one of the things we do in the spiritual community is we confuse abundance and money. These are not the same things at all. And it's one of the reasons why we get really caught up. Okay, abundance is something all of us have in various different ways. So you might have an abundance of beauty, of intelligence, of knowledge of a particular thing that you can then monetize, okay? Money is attracted to abundance. Money in and of itself doesn't have any abundance. It's particularly attracted to abundance of power, but it's attracted to abundance in other ways, okay? So once you have mastered abundance, which is really the realm of deities, and you've mastered that, working with the collective thought form of money, which has just been created for this realm. It doesn't exist in the other realms, okay? You are tapping into a different type of energy, and you want both if you want to be calling in significant sums into your experience, okay? Right? You need to work with the inorganic thought form, which is money, and you need to work with the spiritual energy of abundance, okay? This is something that is really very rarely taught, and I think because it is pretty much rarely understood. It's not understood by many people, right? And so this is not about clearing money blocks. This is not about clearing limiting beliefs, okay? This is about operating at a different level of concern, right? In terms of the things that you're concerned about, the things that you're worried about, okay? So if you want to go deeper into this topic, my program Gods of Money is available on demand. So it was recorded live before Christmas with a beautiful group of clients that I had in that program who went through it, and it's 8 weeks where I go through each of these topics: the nature of power, how you invoke money egregores and wealth deities, right? And to say in the offer summary, okay, this is not necessarily about making you a multimillionaire overnight, although you never know, This is about making sure, helping you to make different decisions from a new level of consciousness, okay? So if you would like to get that program, you can get it now in the classroom. And what I'm doing for this is that if at a later date you would like to join the Destiny program, okay, which is my 12-month spiritual business accelerator, you will be able to get that program for $997. So Gods of Money is $997. The Destiny program is currently $1497. If you want to upgrade from the Gods of Money to the Destiny program at a later date, you'll be able to lock in a lower price for the Destiny program, okay? So I hope that many of you get that information. As I say, this is an advanced class. This is not, if you are still really struggling in survival mode or you perceive yourself to be in survival mode, this is not work that I would want you to start with, okay? This is for people who know that they are on the cusp of power, right? And need to unlock that for the next stage of their lives and their spiritual business acceleration, okay? So I'm going to take some questions. Let's see if you've got some questions.